Race fans, thank you for your patience. The F1 Dream Team is here. It's not Jensen and Lewis, it's Martin Brundle and Jake Humphrey.
Hello. How's it going? Enjoying the show? Good.
The power of F1, eh? You boys have found the dream ticket, haven't you? Crikey.
Well, he has. I have to hang out with Eddie Jordan. No, we have. It's an amazing job, and it's interesting. You know, you can often get caught up in thinking about the fact you're travelling a lot and you're at the airport a lot and you're not with your wife in my case or your whole family in Martin's case. But you just come here to the show, you see the thousands of people lined up and you think that, you know, our job is to follow Formula One around the world. It's incredible. I think the only thing greater than talking about it is doing it. And, you know, Martin's had the pleasure to do both.
Yeah, that's right. Those who can do and those who can't write about it and talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. Me too. 2 years, Jake, you've done. And what a classic couple of years we've had. Jensen Button, 6 out of 7. Brawn GP, nearly didn't happen. British World Champion. And then the massive scrap last year.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, actually. You know, the BBC have been lucky. But Formula One seems to have this incredible way, doesn't it, Martin, of just generating stories every season. We start each year and we're sort of thinking, oh, I wonder what we'll be talking about this year. And 6 months later, we have too much to fill an hour's build-up for a race, which is incredible.
Yeah, we do. And a lot of features we make never even get out onto air, which is so frustrating because for every minute of television you make on a weekend, you can be sure that's sort of 10 hours of somebody's work combined to create it, edit it, and whatever. But our pre-show is very popular. Jake's done a fantastic job for our programme. If we have 7 million people peak, then 6 million of them watch the whole show. Thank you. That's a 50, actually. A 10's not going to do it. Try better for tomorrow.
Listen, I work for the BBC. I'm lucky to have a tenner.
So, we get a big audience that like to see the whole pre-show as well, like the magazine-style stuff. And the red button's been a revelation to be part of as well. So, but when I first did the job back in '97, when I moved on into the company with Murray, I thought, what am I going to say? I'll never have enough to say. There were a few races when Michael Schumacher was dominating and winning the title by August, where I look forward to an ad break on ITV, I must admit, so you can go, now what we're going to do, Murray, because nothing's happening. But, you know, we now get more people watch qualifying on BBC than we used to have watching the race from time to time. So the numbers are fantastic, and that's thanks to all of you for
Thank you all
us.
very much for your support for the BBC's F1 coverage. You lot have been fantastic, so thank you.
You are assuming they all watch.
Well, I'm hoping. Hands up who
they
does.
might not.
Actually, I think
Yeah, good. Oh, that's a relief.
All right, and then we better see the 5 Live people as well, because there's plenty of those I know who like to watch 5 Live, or listen to 5 Live even.
Yes.
We've got a face for radio, unfortunately. But
Let's talk about some of the protagonists that make this wonderful sport so good. Fantastic achievement for Red Bull Racing in 2010. Championship double as relative newcomers to the game.
Well, it was great to see, wasn't it? I mean, you've got to remember that, they started as Stewart Grand Prix, morphed through Jaguar into Red Bull, but they really took off when Red Bull applied their style and their money to the team. I did an interview here, the Sid Watkins lecture with Adrian Newey and Christian Horner yesterday, and they're really nice guys. They're competitive, and they give back to the sport, and it was interesting to hear them so calmly talking about the challenges of last year. And they both said, interestingly, they got up on the Sunday morning of Abu Dhabi convinced they weren't going to win the World Championship for drivers. They thought Alonso had got it, and even towards the end of the race they still weren't convinced they were going to win it. So they had a few challenges, their drivers running into each other, mechanical issues, and but in the end I think the right team and the right man won the championship.
And I think it was good for us, actually, that Red Bull were right there. You know, people sometimes say things like, oh, you never go into the Ferrari garage and chat to people in there. And one of the reasons for that is because the way Ferrari operate is they like to sort of have a closed book and they have their barriers at the front of the garage and that's it. And other teams are the same, whereas Red Bull are, come on in, poke inside the car, touch the car. I know it's on pole, but don't worry about that. Speak to the team principal. There's our driver. Go and have a word with him. Take a look at the rear diffuser. And that is so good because it means that you guys at home get the chance to see us talking about getting this close to a Formula One car minutes before it's due to race. And, you know, Martin can walk up to Seb on the grid. It's going into the dressing room before a World Cup final and saying to Wayne Rooney, you know, you're out there in 3 or 4 minutes, how are you feeling? And it's so good to get that access to Formula One. And that's partly because it's driven by sponsors, and so these teams need to be on the television. But that's what I love about doing this job, is the access. It's incredible.
And they dispelled that myth in 2010 that they weren't just an advertising exercise. They're a serious race team.
Well, they used to have the Formula Unas and the Red Bulletin and all that, and I think they decided to switch off that sort of fun side of it to an extent and get serious. And you know, they spend hundreds of millions of pounds, and it's a marketing exercise for them to sell a product. But at the end of the day, a drinks company took on Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes-Benz and beat them, for goodness sake. It's an extraordinary story, and it all happened here in Milton Keynes.
There you go.
I thought we were in Birmingham.
Here in this country. Milton Keynes, just down the road.
Henry, he's done a lot of travelling. He gets very confused. Don't put him off. You're right, you know where you are.
Guys, we're going to open it to the floor in a moment for some questions from you. We've got a pair of 3-day British Grand Prix tickets to give away in July for a really stonking question.
Hey.
So let's see some hands.
Come on, anything. We will answer a question on anything.
Hang on a sec, hang on.
Now you're in trouble.
Jake, McLaren, Jensen, Lewis.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this year is a big year for McLaren. They haven't won the Constructors' Championship since the late 90s. They now need to do that. And I think that they are aware that perhaps there is a slight issue because their car hasn't been quick enough at the start of the season for quite a few seasons now. And so I think that they'll be working double overtime because when you've got the 2 most recent British world champions, there's nowhere to hide. You can't say, well, you know, we haven't quite got the drivers we want. They've got the drivers they want. They've got the money they need. The infrastructure is in place. So I think that this winter will have been real switch-on time for McLaren, and I think they will come into the new season having done something perhaps slightly different as we saw with the FDUC last year, and I think they should deliver this year. They certainly need to.
Martin, were you worried when Jensen threw his lot in against Lewis in what is perceived to be Lewis's team?
Jensen Button wasn't the world champion for no good reason, and he's won races, and he's a brilliant racing driver. I was concerned that he would struggle in Lewis's environment, but he made it his own environment, and Lewis was the one learning in many respects last year. I still, in terms of absolute raw speed, I'd still put my money on Lewis, but Jensen has a style and an experience that Lewis learned from, and those two were very close. I thought, in my book, Jensen's credibility and stock, if you like, was even higher at the end of 10 than when he won the championship in 9 because he had a car advantage in 9 for much of the year. So did Rubens Barrichello. Jensen made the best of it. But I really admired Jensen for the way... I mean, at this show last year, Jensen was just a brilliant world champion, wasn't he? And I thought even better than I think Vettel's been this winter, if I'm honest. I think Jensen is a class act and a super nice bloke.
Ferrari, Jake. Bit of a mess at Hockenheim. It's all been sort of cleared up. Alonso in the pound seats, Felipe Massa not so. How do you see that dynamic changing?
Oh, it's going to be fascinating this year, I think. You know, Felipe will have gone off this winter, done more sit-ups than ever before, more press-ups than ever before, and said to himself, I'm going to show this team that there are 2 number 1 drivers here. I'm going to show my teammate that he's messing with someone serious. And, you know, Felipe feels very at home in Ferrari, and he will know that his best ever chance of winning a championship is going to be with Ferrari, and he came... 5 seconds away from doing it when Lewis pipped him in 2008. And it'd be interesting to see what happens with that team. I think, you know, question marks over them doing the right thing in Germany, question marks over their strategy being correct at the last race of the year. Domenicali's already said he thought about quitting. They've made changes in the background. So it's fascinating. McLaren need to deliver a good car. Ferrari have made changes because they know that they weren't quite good enough at times. Red Bull are going to be riding this crest of a championship wave. Mercedes will know that the Brawn car is long gone now. They now need to be, you know, seriously delivering. Renault have got Robert Kubica. Everywhere you look, it's just teed up perfectly for another amazing season.
Martin, Lotus and all the kind of hoo-ha between the Tony Fernandez Lotus and the group Lotus, it's a bit confusing. And is it going to get messier while they sort it out?
It's unfortunate, that situation, isn't it? I mean, I do admire what Lotus did. I love Tony Fernandez's enthusiasm and passion for the sport, and it's good that we got people like him coming along. We don't want it to end up just 3 or 4 teams running 5 cars each. We want the fresh teams on the grid and something new to talk about. and we need places for the young drivers to start their career as well. I think Lotus will migrate forwards, the Lotus that we saw in 2010. And now we've got this messy situation with the black car, that's the Lotus Renault, and the green and yellow car, that's going to be the Lotus. And it's not good. It's going to confuse the audience, confuse the commentators.
Good luck.
I'm a Norfolk boy, and it's quite close to my heart, the whole Lotus gig, of course. And I never race for them, as it happens. But it confuses me that the current Lotus, as we saw last year, is promoting the brand of another company. Now you've got the main car company coming in, looking for the high ground.
Messy.
And I can understand that to an extent. I'm sure there's politics, ego, money involved. The Chapman family...
That's F1.
Yeah, the Chapman family have now put their might behind Lotus, the car company, and the Lotus Renault team, as has Nigel Mansell and some others. And it strikes me as that's the true Lotus, the people who make the cars, that's the brand. And Team Lotus, it's such a mess that I really hope they sort it out before the season starts, because it doesn't... I don't think anybody comes out of that winning the way it is at the moment.
I guess Tony Fernandez must be disappointed that the Chapman family, who created it originally, have sort of jumped ship, if you like.
Yeah, I think so. I think, Tony Fernandez deserves huge credit for making Lotus cars realise that there is value in the name of Lotus. With these things, everyone can guess, and, we can give you our best opinion, but no one really knows what's going on behind the scenes. And I just think, it's a shame that it hasn't worked out for Tony, because he brought Lotus back. He was fiercely proud, wasn't he, of the fact they were running the Lotus name. He had Clive Chapman's hat, the black hat that he threw in the air when they won races, in a glass box with a little sticker on saying only to be broken in the event of a victory, and little things like that. And it was a great story. And as a couple of Norfolk boys, it was quite emotional, because the Lotus car was the first out onto the track in Bahrain at the start of last season. And it is a shame to end like this, but they've got a few weeks to sort of get their house in order, really, so we'll wait and see what happens.
It's going to be mega, isn't it? Up and down the grid.
Well, maybe they'd like to come out from over there and tell us what's going on behind that wall.
Don't be too unkind. They won stand of the show on Thursday.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Right, let's have some stinkers from you lot. Look at all those hands. Up to you, Dave.
Yeah. With engine sizes getting smaller and power getting less, as opposed to aerodynamics, cornering speed, curves, etc. From a fan's perspective, do you think it's a good thing for Formula One or a bad thing?
I think that one of the issues with Formula One is overtaking, obviously. It's been talked about for the last few seasons. We can always look at the cars and concentrate on the cars and say what could be improved, but I think part of the issue is the circuits. I mean, you take this season, for example, we saw a great race in Brazil, plenty of overtaking. Exactly the same cars and the same drivers went to Abu Dhabi, and probably the greatest natural talent on the grid had to get past a rookie in a slower car and couldn't do it. It's not because Fernando isn't talented or because the Ferrari can't overtake other cars. It's because the track simply wouldn't allow it. So I think that with the tracks are the tracks that we've got. So I don't see a huge issue in having certain things on the cars that help you to overtake. One of the beauties of Formula One is that we've got these wonderful new technological advances that we can learn about and that we can enjoy, and some people love that and some don't. But I think for people that like that, they can learn about it. For those that just care about racing, they'll see more overtaking. Martin?
As long as it's not artificial, we must still be a skill, must be something to revere when an overtake is made. And we all remember Mansell going around the outside of Piquet at Silverstone. We remember Mansell and Senna just about touching and sparking all the way down the main straight in Barcelona. We remember Berger being overtaken around the outside in the Peraltada in Mexico. And my analogy is, if you double the size of a Premiership goal so that the result ends up 30-25 between Man U and Man City, then where's the excitement in that? So it shouldn't be too easy to overtake, and they've got to set it up absolutely right in which straights they can use it, how long for. The KERS button is in there as well. That some teams will have the KERS. That'll be like KERS and rear wing together, I think, is something like 160 horsepower equivalency that you just put into a car with no extra weight, some extra drag if it goes a bit faster. But so we're going to see a lot of differential in speed at the end of a straight, which they need to be sure is safe. The driver's saying, hey, I'm looking down too much in the cockpit pressing buttons. But so there are a few things they've got to get spot on to make that work. But, unfortunately, with tyres, brakes, aerodynamics, the way that they are, you're not, unless you double the length of a braking zone, which you can't do, then overtaking is always going to be a problem.
You were worried about not getting a word in with Murray Walker. Unbelievable.
It's been 2 hours already. That's a full race distance, Martin. You're fine, mate.
He's good, isn't he? He's good.
You're going to fly.
I've got plenty to say. You'll hear it next year. Don't worry. This year.
Right. Keep working around, Dave.
Hi. With spectator emphasis mainly on the Drivers' Championships and spectators wanting to see the best driver out there win and teams naturally wanting to engineer the best results for the team as a whole, do you think the 2011 series will have the balance right after what happened to Ferrari and the subsequent changes?
I think that what we realised this year is that the Formula One fans will accept some things and they won't accept others. They will accept Felipe Massa allowing Kimi Raikkonen through to win the world title at the final race of the year, which is exactly what Ferrari did. They swapped their cars in Germany. However, in Germany it was too early. In Austria, in 2002, it was far, far too early when Rubens Barrichello and Michael went toe-to-toe, and there was outcry. So that's not acceptable. That is acceptable. So it's up to Formula One to sort of find some kind of middle ground. And we know now that they've revoked the rule about team orders and that we will see cars swapping and chopping if they need to. But there needs to be an awareness of what the fans want to see. And we don't want to see in Australia Mark Webber allowing Sebastian Vettel through if that's the whim of Christian Horner or Red Bull. That's not what the fans want. But what they do want, and we have to remember, it's a team sport. So if 2 races to go, there's a chance to win the world title, then perhaps you should be doing that. I mean, we argued why on earth didn't Red Bull allow Sebastian Vettel past Mark Webber in Brazil? And only 4 or 5 races before, we were scolding Ferrari for allowing a swap on the track. So it's all about working out where the boundaries are and what is and isn't acceptable. It's a team sport. Cars will always swap on the track because Ferrari want to win the title. It's not, in their eyes, it's not a driver's championship, it's a constructor's championship.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's the fans. You've got to say your piece because that we love to count the fans watching the TV, turning up at the racetrack, on the website hits. If it's not for the fans, I've always say let's race on a Wednesday afternoon and have weekends off like everybody else does. And therefore, if the fans are not happy, then whatever you put in the regulations, it doesn't matter. It's not right. But it is a team sport, as Jake said, and I think it was clear that didn't go down well with the fans. And the fans couldn't understand, well, is it against the regulations or not? If it is, then you've got to punish them. And so Formula One didn't handle that very well because the fact of life is that right now, that effectively team orders are taking place. Who's going to drive the Ferrari in the first 3 days in Valencia? And who's going to get these bits? Who's going to do the original, the early Pirelli tyre testing? And who's going to get which mechanic and which engineer? Who's going to get which number in the team? And it just goes on. There are so many points at which a driver gets favoured over another that, unfortunately, the only ones that really come out are on days like in Hockenheim. But so it's an impossible situation to get right. But clearly, that one, I was cool. I said at the end of the first lap, the Ferraris have got they're in the wrong order. Great start for Ferrari, in the wrong order. What they're going to do about it? So quite clearly, I obviously accepted team orders at that point.
Good one. Okay, we've got time for a couple more.
I hear that McLaren aren't going to come to the first test. Do you think that's because they've got a secret that they want to hold back? And if so, what do you think it might be?
It's intriguing, isn't it? Very intriguing. I think that perhaps it's McLaren thinking that for the past couple of seasons they haven't had the off-season that they would have wanted, so an extra 4 or 5 days could really help them. Or maybe they have got something wonderful on their car that they don't want the other teams to see and that they want to keep that secret. But I'd be surprised because that car's going to be spotted in pre-season anyway, and it's amazing how quickly they can turn things around. I think that perhaps McLaren have just looked at the calendar and thought, listen, if we have an extra 4 or 5 days, then we'll have a quicker car, and that's all they want, isn't it?
Yeah, there's 2 ways to do it, isn't there? There's rush your car out and get as much experience with that car as you can, or buy yourself another week or 2 and keep the development going. Ferrari have chosen a different route. They're going early with their new car. McLaren, if they want to hide something, they can. I mean, Red Bull last year, they had stickers pretending they had exhausts in different places on the car, so in the photographs it wasn't absolutely clear they had the blown exhaust that was so effective through the year. But they can put that stuff on later if they want, but either they've had an issue in production or in the crash testing, or they just want to keep maxing out the car. Remember, I think it was in 1988 where they didn't run the car until the last day of testing and then dominated the season. So it depends what package you got brewing up, really.
Right, so great questions. Thank you very much. We've got to let Martin and Jake go. You've got to choose which was the best question.
What?
What?
Oh my life.
I
like the question about the fans, and because it's a really pertinent point that everyone here probably supports the drivers, whereas the teams support the teams. I think that's a good question, so I would like to pick that as the question of the day.
Well done, madam. You are going to the British Grand Prix in July for all 3 days. Super.
Well done. See you there.
Stay where you are, and we'll come and sort you out.
Jake will give you a lift in the mornings if you haven't got any transport.
Yeah, no problem at all. I've only got 2 seats, so it's just us. Is that all right?
Guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, Henry Hope Frost.
Lovely to see you all.
Have a great season. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thanks very
Martin
much.
Brundle and Jake Humphrey.
Thanks very much, guys, and thanks for all your continued support for our Formula One coverage. Really appreciate it. Thank you.